All right, guys, so we've looked at prototypical inheritance. We saw that certain prototypes inherit other prototypes. Like when we create a rectangle object, that will have its own prototype, but then it also inherits the object prototype. Even arrays, if we have an array here, it has its own prototype with all these different methods, and then you can see it inherits the object prototype. Okay, and that's called the prototype chain, and this is prototypical inheritance. Now what I want to do in this video is show you how you can inherit your own objects. So basically we've been working with just a rectangle up to this point, but what I want to do now is create a shape constructor for a shape object, and all that's going to take in is a name, and we're just going to set this dot name equal to name. And what I want to be able to do is have other shapes that will inherit this shape constructor. All right, and if we put prototypes on shape, then circles, rectangles, whatever shapes we create should be able to access those prototype methods. The syntax for this is kind of grimy. I think that classes make this a lot easier with just having extends and using subclasses, which we're going to get to very soon. But I do want to show you this syntax. If you're creating a large project and you're using object-oriented programming in JavaScript and you want to have inheritance and all that, you're probably going to go with classes. You do have some perks doing it this way, but the syntax is just, I don't like it personally. But let's go ahead and let's create a function called rectangle. There's just a lot more steps to do inheritance with prototypes than there is with classes. So it's a function rectangle, and that's going to take in name, height, and width. And for the height and the width, we're going to do what we usually do, is just set this, so the current instance width property we're going to set to whatever the width is that's passed in, and same, actually I'll do height first, so let's say height and this dot height. Now I want, like I said, I want to inherit the shape constructor, so what we can do here is call the shape function, but we don't want to just do this, because in shape we're saying this dot name. In a regular function, this pertains to the window object, which obviously we don't want. We want it to pertain to the object's instance that uses the constructor function. And that's fine when we're saying new, something new shape, but we're not doing that here. So what we can do is we can use the call method. So if we use call, it will still call the function, but it allows us to pass in this, whatever the context of this, which in this case will be this object. And then we also want to pass in name, because that's where we're assigning name. So now I should be able to come down and create a rectangle object. So let's say new rectangle, and that's going to take in a name. So rectangle 1, and let's do 20 and 20. And then we'll console log rect. And there we go. So you can see it has a name and a height and a width. So I also want to have other shapes though. So let's copy this, and let's say we want to have a circle, and a circle isn't going to have a height and a width. That's why I didn't put a height and a width on shape. It's just the only thing that they have in common with shape in terms of properties is name. So circle will have a radius. So instead of doing this, we want to change it to this dot radius. Okay, and then if we want to create a circle object, we can pass in, we'll use 30 for the radius, and let's call it circle 1, and we want to use the circle constructor, and we'll call this, just call it cir. Okay, and now we have two objects, and you can see they're both using the name from the shape. Now, one of the reasons that you use inheritance is to inherit prototypes, okay, prototypical inheritance. So I want to be able to have a prototype method on shape. So let's say prototype, and I want to be able to use it whether it's a rectangle, circle, or whatever. So let's create a method called log name. So we'll set that to a function, and we're just going to log from the function, and we'll use backticks, and I'll say shape name colon, and then we should have access to this, so we can say this dot name. Now let's come down here and let's see, I'm just gonna comment that out for now, and let's do a console log. Actually, we don't need to console log because we're doing it from the method, and I want to be able to say rect, so rect dot, and then the log name function. Now if I do that, I get an error because there's an additional step we need to take if we want to inherit prototypes. So we need to set the rectangle, dot prototype, and we want to set it to the shape prototype, but we don't want to set it directly. We don't want to point directly to it. We want to use object.create, which we looked at in the last video. And then we can pass in the shape.prototype. Remember, it takes in an object of prototypes. So now if I save, it should say shape name rectangle1. So we're able to use on the rectangle object, which uses the rectangle constructor, which inherits from the shape and also inherits the prototypes. We now can use log name or any other prototype method that we add to shape. So let's just put a comment here and say inherits shape prototypes. Now if we want to use it on circle or any other shape, again we have to do the same thing. So we'll just change that to circle, and then we can go ahead and do cir.logname, and we can use that as well. Now one other thing I want to address, let's comment those out and uncomment this. And if we look at the rectangle or circle and you look in the prototype at the constructor, it's actually using the shape constructor. So if I were to console log here rect.constructor, right now it's shape, and we want it set to rectangle. We want circle set to the circle constructor. So what we can do, actually we'll just leave that. What we can do is go right here and let's say set prototype constructors, and we just want to take the rectangle constructor function and set the prototype dot constructor, and we want to just simply set it to rectangle, which is our constructor function, and then same thing with circle. So circle, now if I save, you can see that it's showing us the rectangle constructor. If we look in here, we look in the prototype at the constructor, it's rectangle. Same thing with circle. If we look in here, constructor is circle. Now this is what I mean when I say that this gets a little bit messy, and there's just a lot more you have to do compared to using classes. When you use classes and you want to inherit, you just simply say one class extends another, and then automatically all the methods you create are available on that subclass. And I'm going to get to that very soon, but I want you guys to know exactly what's going on under the hood. But I mean, you can do it this way if you want. I just know for me, I prefer the class syntax. So the next thing I want to show you is how we can override a prototype method. So right now we have log name on the shape prototype, but let's say we want to have a log name do something a little different on a rectangle, and that would actually be a good example of polymorphism. So let's grab this prototype method of log name, and I'm going to go, let's see, directly under where we set the rectangle prototype, and let's change this to rectangle. And the only thing that I'm going to make different is this right here. We'll say rectangle name instead of shape name. So now we'll come down here, we can get rid of this and comment that out, and let's uncomment these two. So now you can see that log name for rectangle is saying rectangle name instead of shape name. And we could do the same for, actually, I'll just leave it for circle, but this is a good example of polymorphism where we have, log name, we have the same method that does two different things. And of course, we could have 5, 10, 20 more log names that do something different.